Welcome to the Talking Classics podcast. Hello everybody, so I am very lucky to be here with Michael Marshall Clark, who is, you may have known him from Instagram, the man with the golden roller. And here it is behind you, Michael, in all its glory.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for bringing it down to Bridge Classic Cars today.
Pleasure, thank you for inviting me.
No, it's brilliant to have you here. So, you've had this car for about 3 years now, is that right?
Yes, yeah, in February next year it will be 4 years. So it's kind of 3.5 years, yeah.
Amazing. So I really would like to know, and I'm sure our viewers would like to know at home, have you always been such a classic car enthusiast, or is this something that's happened recently?
So, no, I've always been a car nut. I actually have a degree in automotive design. So I've loved cars since I was a little kid, and Mum used to go and buy me a little Matchbox car every week, you know, so I've been obsessed with cars, and yeah, love classic cars, and sort of grew up watching the Roger Moore Bond films on TV when I was a kid, and there was always a Silver Shadow in them. And I was kind of like, oh, I love those. I'd love one of those one day. So yes, obsessed with cars, obsessed with classic cars, but particularly soft spot for Silver Shadows. And
I can see why, and this one especially, it is stunning. As it's coming round the driveway at Bridge Classic Cars, it's like, it takes your breath away. It is so gorgeous.
Yeah,
it
well,
really
she
is.
came from here. She came from here. So this is where she came from. So today she was kind of like, why am I back here? Yeah, we've done about sort of 10,000 plus miles since I bought her from here. And it's great to be back, really.
So you say that you've loved Rolls-Royces. Were you always wanting a Shadow specifically, or were you wanting another car? What is the story of you finding this beautiful car?
Okay, so I had Silver Shadow. They were launched in 1965, and I had a very early car, first of all. I had a 1968 car, but the bodywork wasn't in very good condition. And it turned out that the mechanicals weren't either, so I ended up spending quite a lot of money on her. But at the time, I was designing sunglasses for a company, and I decided that we needed to kind of launch them somewhere glamorous. So I decided we'd do that in Cannes on the Croisette, and I thought, well, we need some kind of like pop-up shop or something to sell them from. And I thought, well, I know, we could use the Silver Shadow because the glasses were made in France, but they were designed in Britain. So I thought, well, the Silver Shadow uses a version of the Citroën hydropneumatic suspension, French, but British icon. So we could use that as the pop-up shop. Yeah. So I had the car, not this one, but the one I had before, I had it chrome wrapped. And some of the Rolls-Royce purists would probably think that's sacrilege, but it looked amazing on the Croisette, this chromed Rolls-Royce, and we were selling sunglasses out of the back. And a guy kept looking at the car every day when we kept driving to the Croisette. And at the end of the week, he came to me and he said, would you sell the car? And I said, yes. So as far as I know, it's still there. It probably still chromed. I mean, it looks amazing on the Côte d'Azur. Yeah. And I had to fly back.
So I had to get a lift home some other way.
Yeah. And so then I was on the hunt for another Silver Shadow, and I knew that I didn't want an early one next time. Auric's got the flared wheel arches, the wider track. So she's a late 74 car. So she's got a lot of the refinements that Rolls-Royce put into the car before they then changed to the Shadow 2, and it had the kind of rubber bumpers. I prefer the chrome bumper. So
they do look very beautiful against the gold, definitely.
And I saw her. I was in America, and I was looking on the internet, and I saw a picture of her here at Bridge Classic Cars. And I just thought, oh my God, that looks amazing. And to be honest, she completely bewitched me. And I tried to get hold of her, but it had just been sold. And I was like, oh no! So I came home, and then about a month or 2 months later, I saw her for sale again at Bridge. So I called Craig and said, you know, how come the car's for sale again? And he said, oh, the sale fell through. So I was like, oh, great. Well, don't sell her. I'm coming down to see her.
Like it's meant to be.
I know, exactly. So I bought her on the 15th of February in 2020. And since I've owned her, I like to research about her history, because she's only 3 owners. I'm the 3rd owner from new. And I found out that she was ordered on the 14th of February, 1974. So then I bought her on the 15th of February. So it was kind of, but I called Craig on the 14th of February. So it was almost like it was, yeah.
On the 14th.
So she is my love, you see, Valentine's Day, 14th of February. So there we go.
That is amazing. And you mentioned that her name's Auric.
Yes.
Now that is a really cool, interesting name. Can you tell me more about it? What is the idea behind the name?
Okay, so I get asked this a lot. So as I've already said, I'm a big James Bond fan, 007 fan, and hence The Man with the Golden Roller.
Yes, very
because
cool.
The Man with the Golden Gun is one of my favourite Roger Moore films. And so when I saw her, and she's very gold. So Auric was Goldfinger's Christian name, which of course is a boy's name, but Sean Connery in Goldfinger says, when he first hears Auric, he says, Auric sounds like a French nail polish. So I've always thought that it's a girl's name, and it sounds quite feminine.
Yeah.
And in Latin, Auric actually means something that is made of gold or looks as if it's made of gold. So it's kind of perfect.
It's absolutely perfect, and I love it, and I love the story behind it as well. It's really, really interesting. So you are a member as well of the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club.
Yes.
And you have been doing some writing for them, I have heard.
Yes. So I started off joining the club, and I would actually recommend that anybody who's got a classic car joins the owners club, because you meet like-minded people, you get to know about the cars, you get lots of help and advice when you're first starting out. And now that I'm kind of a seasoned RREC member, I've now been roped into the committee.
That's really cool.
And Auric actually won her class at the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club National Rally.
Amazing.
2 years ago. And then this year, I won the Observer Trophy that's awarded for the best non-technical article of the year. And it was an article about our trip to Champagne. So it was all because of Auric, not because of me. I wrote the article, but she was in the pictures. So yeah.
And that's really cool. So what was your trip in Champagne like? I like the title of the article. It was Trains, Champagne and Automobiles.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because I'm not a member of the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast
Well, you should become a member.
I couldn't. Yeah, I should. I would need to get myself a Rolls-Royce, I reckon.
No, you don't have to have a Rolls-Royce to
Really?
join. No.
Well, there you go then. Maybe I should. Then I can read some more of your work.
Yeah.
No, I didn't get to read it, unfortunately, but I've heard great things. So was it really fun writing it? Is writing something that you do a lot of, or is it something that you're kind of new to?
Well, I guess being creative, being a designer, I've always kind of had an interest in writing, and they say there's a book in everybody. I think I'm probably just writing mine one article at a time. But I do enjoy it, and I've actually just written another article about a trip to the Loire in my Bentley Turbo R, because one is never enough, as classic car buffs will know. Once you've been bitten, you then end up buying another one, and then you have the problem that you've got no parking spaces. But, you know. And I've also written an article about what's the oldest part of a Silver Shadow.
Yes.
So there is something in this car that is over 500 years old. And it's not the oil. It is the Walnut Dash. So
You mentioned this earlier to me, and this is such a cool piece of history. Now, I absolutely love history with a car, as I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned about the Dash, the Walnut Dash. So please do tell me more.
So Rolls-Royce only used walnut from Lombardy in Italy. So they used to go to little villages at the north of Milan, and the walnut nodules that grow just above and just below the ground, they're harvested after 500 years of growth, and then they are kept in cellars, a bit like fine wines, for up to a century before they're ready, and then they are cut into tiny slivers to make the veneer, and they end up on the dashboard of cars like this. So that walnut that's on Auric's dashboard, based on her production date of 1974, was growing in Lombardy when Leonardo da Vinci was a boy.
That is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
It is amazing. And I love the other little bits of history you found out about the car as well. So you took the seats out a little while ago, didn't you? You were mentioning, to see if what was said is true, and that is that there is signatures from the original makers of the seats on them. So did you find them? How did you get to find those?
Yeah, so you need to look after the leather in the car, obviously, and there's a lot of it. So I took the seats out, and I'd read stories that they used to sign the bottom of the seat, who'd ever made the seat, and sure enough, there is a piece of webbing with a signature on it, and also the chassis number. So all the seats had the same chassis number, so they were married up with the right car.
Right.
And they were all cut from. So there's 8 hides in that car, and they were all matched, and so they were all written with the chassis number on, so they were assigned to the chassis number right at the beginning of production.
Yeah. And
they followed it all the way through. But as you said, I actually found an old business card of one of the previous owners that had obviously slipped down by the side of the driver's seat years and years ago. And he was an antique dealer in Eastbourne. So he was the original owner. The original owner was a company, so she was a company car. And he obviously sat in the back, and there was a chauffeur. And then when he retired to Eastbourne, and it turns out he was an antique dealer. And I know that because I found his business card.
That is brilliant. And as well, you also mentioned that with the grille for the Rolls-Royce, they are all individually made for each and every car.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And you said that the makers kind of know if they were the person that made the grille for it, if they see the car. Yeah,
that's right. So back in the 1970s, there were 8 men, because it wasn't sort of enlightened times, I guess, but the eight craftsmen at Crewe who made the grille. And they didn't use any measuring instruments at all. They did it all by eye. And they're individual pieces of stainless steel, not chrome, and they said that they could, if they saw a Rolls-Royce out on the street, they could tell whether they'd made that grille or not, because every single one was slightly different, and they all had their own slightly different way of doing it. And the other thing is that when you look at it, it looks like the front of the Parthenon, with kind of straight columns, but they're not actually straight. If you look really closely, they're all very, very subtly curved. And it's the same visual trick that the Greeks used on the Parthenon. So none of those columns at the Parthenon are actually straight, because if they were straight, they'd look curved, they'd look like they tapered. So they made them curved, and then they look straight, so it's all a trick of the eye.
There we go, I'm learning something new every day. But that is not the only really cool thing that you've seen about someone who made the car. Were you at a car show, did you mention, where the maker of the actual roof you met as well?
Yes. So 3 years ago, we were at Burley House for the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club annual rally, and this lovely old guy came up to the car, and he was stroking the roof. And I got chatting to him, and he said he was asking all sorts of questions about when the car was in the factory, etc. And I told him, and he said, I thought so, I put the roof on this car. And we had a fantastic conversation, and he was telling me all about the intricacies of how they put them on. And I said to him, well, I'm glad that it had the vinyl roof, or the Everflex roof, as Rolls-Royce called them, because originally, on the original order, it was meant to have a top hat roof, not an Everflex roof. Now, a top hat roof was a painted roof, so it was going to be painted black rather than in the Everflex. Yeah. But thankfully, in the July of 1974, the guy who ordered it must have found some extra money, because he amended the order and he paid £126 extra to have the Everflex roof put on instead. And I'm glad he did.
Yeah, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, you take this car out on any occasion that you can. And as you said with your article, when you took it to Champagne, you've been on lots of adventures with it. And we can see that from your Instagram. It's so lovely looking at it and seeing it on all these beautiful locations. So where is kind of the best adventure you've had with this car?
Wow, that's quite a question, really, because, I mean, I think, you know, I loved taking her to Champagne. That was absolutely amazing. But, you know, I just love to see the reaction that she gets from people if I just take her to the local, you know, cars and coffee meet.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, to be honest, I take her shopping. I go to Marks and Spencer's in her, and so she makes me smile every time I get in her. So, actually, she makes every journey a joy. So you don't have to go long distances, but I do believe in using the cars. And you know, I'm not one for kind of wrapping it up in cotton wool, and they're complex pieces of engineering. They need to be used. And so, you know, one of the big trips we have got planned, or I want to take her to Spain this year. Get the ferry over to Santander, and then kind of motor around northern Spain, and it would be rude not to go to Rioja on the way.
You mentioned a little while ago that you used to design cars. So how did that come about? What was your interest in designing that then led you to want to design cars as well?
Well, I think it all started when Mum used to buy me a little Matchbox toy every week. And actually, I was trying to think the other day what the first one I can remember getting was. And it was a Silver Shadow. Not the saloon, it was a Corniche, but nonetheless, it was a Silver Shadow. But then I started kind of drawing cars and was just obsessed with them, bought lots of books about cars. And, growing up in rural Norfolk, when I went to my careers teacher and said, I want to be a car designer, they were like, I don't know how you do that. Right. So I kind of basically had to research it all myself. I wrote to Ford in Dunton a lot when I was a kid, and they were brilliant at encouraging me. They must have got sick of me writing letters, but they would send me stuff back, and they would say, this is what you have to do, and these are where you can go, and you can become a car designer. So they helped me a lot, and actually I ended up working for them. So when I was at uni, I did my placement at Ford, so I actually ended up working for Ford. So that's kind of how it all started.
And then so you went on from designing the cars to then things like your sunglasses that you mentioned as well, which is really, really cool. So you can use your skills in so many different ways. Now, I would really love to ask you about what you think about the designing of the Shadow.
Well, it's interesting because the guy who designed the Silver Shadow, a guy called John Blatchley, he was actually consulted by Goodwood Rolls-Royce when they were designing the Phantom, when they were trying to get the essence of what a Rolls-Royce is. And one of the things he said to them, and actually if you look at the Phantom, you can see it, but you can also see it in the Silver Shadow, is what John Blatchley called the land yacht. So it's actually like a reverse wedge. So this kind of waist rail line that runs down the Silver Shadow tapers away, and the bottom of the bumper comes up to meet it. So it's like a reverse wedge, and that was meant to look like a yacht going through the ocean. So the kind of bow of the yacht would be high up, and it would taper away towards the stern. So that's why the front of the Rolls-Royce is a lot higher than the back, and it was all designed, all of the lines along it, the straight lines along it, the chrome strip along the sill, the chrome strip along the middle, and the coach line, the hand-painted coach line along the waist rail, were all designed to accentuate that land yacht feel.
And it is epic. It's a complete beast of a car, isn't it? There is no denying the grandeur.
Yeah, she's big.
The grandeur of it. And the inside as well. So did you also design kind of the inside of the car as well?
I did, yes.
Yeah?
So at Dunton, it was an exterior and interior studio.
Yeah.
But, you know, Auric's interior was designed way before ergonomics. I do laugh sometimes every time I get in the car, because on the beautiful Walnut Dash, you know, they just kind of like on a Thursday afternoon in February, they decided to put the switch here, and, you know, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, it was over here. So there was no real kind of ergonomics about where the gauges are put.
Right.
Yeah, and her interior is more sort of fine furniture than it is kind of cockpit like we're used to in kind of modern cars.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that. I was very lucky and got to sit in Auric earlier, and the seats are so comfortable. They're like complete armchairs.
They are.
In the car.
Yeah, they are. Well, they've got horsehair and springs and everything in. They are just like literally like sitting in an armchair.
It is, and it's the height of sophistication inside there as well. You do really feel like you're kind of going into a gentleman's parlour when you're sitting inside.
Yes, you kind of feel like you should be drinking a brandy and, you know, have a cigar as well.
But we don't recommend that.
No,
driving.
not while driving,
Don't
of course.
Do that whilst you're driving. But it's a very comfortable driver, I guess. Are you driving down from London today?
I believe in using the car a lot, and I don't mind using her in the wet. I'm not one of these people who just drives it in the dry. But when you start putting salt on the roads, that's when she needs to go away for a little hibernation for a few weeks.
Just a little hibernation period over the winter, then come out shining and sparkling when the sunshine is shining again in the spring, I guess.
Absolutely.
So we're going to do something a little bit different now and quite exciting. So Michael is going to take us for a little walk around Auric and tell us some really cool design features about the beautiful Shadow we have here. So take it away.
Okay, so Auric is a late Shadow. They were never called Shadow 1. Sometimes people call them Shadow 1, but she's a Shadow. The Shadow 2, when that came out, it had the rubber bumpers for US safety reasons. And personally, I think that the chrome bumpers look more elegant, and this was how it was originally designed. So the first thing about the Shadow that I love is all of the little chrome and stainless steel accents.
Ooh, yes.
But everything has got little touches of chrome around it.
Here, the side lights.
And even around the indicators and the side lights, they're just like little bits of jewellery around the car. Even the little washer jets are you know, chrome plated.
Wow.
So they really kind of pop out across the car. And with her being a late Shadow, she had the flared wheel arches. So the earlier Shadows didn't have this flare on the wheel arch, and they had a narrower track as well. So the reason they had to flare the wheel arch is because they widened the track. Right. So I feel that they look better with the wider track because the wheels fill the wheel arch more.
Yeah, it's almost like a little kind of encasing for it, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. And then the other thing is this kind of wonderful sweep you get from the wheel arch, which then just kind of, it kind of apes the wheel arches of the Rolls-Royces of the sort of 1920s and 1930s with that kind of little flourish into the sill.
It's like a real flow, isn't it, to the car? It kind of flows down and then you feel, and it goes over the back wheel as well. Yeah, definitely, it's gorgeous. And I really like the way that the coach line here kind of is mirrored on the wheels as well.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting actually, because this was painted by hand, so I wouldn't have wanted to do that, you know, go along the entire length of the car in one go and paint that. I mean, that must have been the worst job ever at Crewe. But to go onto the wheel plates, they're called wheel plates, do you know how they did that?
No, tell me.
So they put it on a potter's wheel. They had a potter's wheel in the factory, and they painted the coach line on the wheel trims, on the wheel plate, on a potter's wheel.
That's really cool. Well, and a clever idea as well. A nifty way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feel sorry for the person who's like, oh, I have this really awful job of trying to do that one. Someone else just went, sure.
I wonder how many times they had to do it, whether or not they ever made a mistake, and then they had to rub it off.
Yeah. the steadiness of the hand
Yeah.
to be able to do that. It's really, really, really clever.
And then the kind of jewellery of the sort of the little chrome touches is kind of mirrored in the interior, where you've got all these kind of pops of
Yeah.
just brightness across the dashboard, and you know, around the radio. All the little knobs and controls are just like little tiny pieces of jewellery.
Yeah, I love how you've described it as jewellery, because that is really what it feels like. You look in and you see a little shimmer here, and then you look somewhere else and there's another shimmer. It's really beautiful.
Because we're used to kind of like black switches, you know, and kind of, you know, they're tactile, I guess, but they're just all black these days, where here they were actually, you know, individually designed and thought about, and on the black interior, as you say, it just pops out, really.
It's kind of made it a whole driving experience, isn't it? It's a whole kind of experience in itself, even just sitting in the car, then driving it and having all of these different senses tickled, I guess, by all of the lovely things inside the car and out.
Well, and this was the first kind of Rolls-Royce that was marketed at people driving themselves, because up until then, most Rolls-Royces were probably chauffeur-driven. People used to buy the Bentleys and drive them, but the Rolls-Royces were more chauffeur-driven. Right. But the Silver Shadow was aimed very much at a kind of new customer, being the kind of owner-driver. So it was much more about the driving experience.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, it is such a pleasure to have it here in our Atelier building, and you can just see the sheer size of it against some of the other cars. Like, so we've got our Aston Martin Vantage. Okay, it's not a massive car, but you can really tell the extreme size of the Rolls-Royce as well. Was there a reason for them being so big? Was it just to be so grand, or...?
Well, this is actually a standard wheelbase. They did do a long wheelbase version as well, which had about another 6 inches or so in the wheelbase.
Almost the size of a limousine.
I know, exactly, yeah. Well, some of them did have a partition put in so that, you know, if you wanted to sit in the back and you didn't want to talk to the chauffeur.
I don't want to sit either.
But yeah, I mean, they are big, but actually this is smaller than the car it replaced. So the Silver Cloud was actually longer than the Silver Shadow, and yet it had a lot less room inside. So when they did this, when they got rid of the chassis, they were able to lower the car and get a lot more interior space. But of course, there's a big engine up there, so you need, you know, there's a long bonnet. You need the space to get a 6.75 litre V8 engine in there.
So it does definitely stand against the other cars on the road on the motorway when you've driven it down.
Yeah, I mean, she's only got 3 gears, so she's geared more for kind of torque. It's about torque rather than sort of top speed.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can certainly drive in London traffic you know, easily. So that's why the royal family used to like Rolls-Royces, because they can go along at kind of 5 miles an hour very, very easily, and they can do it all day. But, you know, you can keep up with modern day traffic. You can easily, you know, do the speed limit 17 miles an hour on the motorway. And you know, that's what makes the Silver Shadow a very good classic car, in my opinion, because you've got the kind of feel of a classic car and the look of a classic car, and yet somehow it kind of still looks quite modern. It still looks quite modern, and because it was very forward-thinking when Rolls-Royce introduced it, you know, it's still kind of up to date today. So it's got air conditioning, electric windows. You know, you can keep up with modern traffic, and you don't feel like you know, when I step out of my modern BMW and get into this, I don't feel like, you know, oh, I wish I was still in the modern BMW. The modern BMW to me just feels sterile and you know, it's a mode of transport to get me from A to B. With this, it's about the journey. It doesn't matter whether I'm popping down to the shops or the supermarket, or I'm doing a tour to Champagne. You know, every journey in her is a joy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's kind of the pull of a classic as well. It's about the journey and you enjoying the experience of being in the car, surrounded by the car and going on these adventures with it. So yeah, it's amazing. And thank you so much for giving us kind of the details about the exterior and the design side of it as well. It's really, really interesting.
My pleasure. Thank you.
What you've done by getting Auric out and about, and you've brought back memories for people as well, like the gentleman who was like, oh, I did the roof. Like if you hadn't have brought her out, he would have never had that moment of like pleasure from getting to see it and things
Absolutely.
like that. So it's really special.
And a lot of people come up to Silver Shadows and say, oh, we got married in one. Because a lot of them were kind of wedding cars.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Auric never has been. But you know, I think people have an association with Silver Shadows because they were the biggest production vehicle that Rolls-Royce has ever made, right up to the present day. So they produced more Silver Shadows than any other model.
Yeah.
So I guess they're probably more well known than other Rolls-Royces.
Yeah, but I think that's probably a good thing as well, because it shows that what a good, reliable and sought after car they were, because so many people wanted them. I would really love to talk about what you mentioned earlier. So you're part of the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club, and you were thinking about kind of recreating a photo, a really poignant photo. Please tell me more about that. I'm sure our listeners at home would absolutely love to hear about it, and maybe if they have a Silver Shadow, they might want to get involved as well.
Absolutely, love them to. So yes, in 2025, it's the 60th anniversary of the launch of the Silver Shadow. And it was such a kind of a unique car for Rolls-Royce because it was the first car that used a monocoque rather than a separate chassis. And with all of the complex engineering in it, it was the most avant-garde car they'd ever produced. So quite a milestone for Rolls-Royce history. So I want to make a big song and dance about the 60th anniversary of the Silver Shadow in 2025. And there is a 1970s advertising shot that is quite iconic and was, at the time, the most expensive advertising shot ever taken because it had 100 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadows parked up on a closed section of the M6.
Wow.
And the 100 is significant because 100 was the number of cars they produced a month. So that was the number of new owners there would be each month,
Yeah.
100. So 100 cars parked on the M6. Obviously, I can't do it on the M6, Molly, but what I'm hoping to do is recreate that in 2025, hopefully at Brooklands, the Motor Museum in Weybridge in Surrey. And I'd like to get 100 Silver Shadows of all different shapes and colours and get them all parked up and recreate that shot because I just think it would be amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a really exciting idea and a way to kind of showcase the car as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to get all sorts of people involved, you know, not just members of the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club, anybody who's got a Silver Shadow. And I put it out on social media earlier on in the year just to sort of test the water. And I was absolutely bowled over by the response I got from all over the world, people saying, yes, let me know when and I'll be there. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we can make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, if you do make it happen, definitely let us know because we will be there.
I
We're
will.
definitely
Yeah.
coming along. That would be
Great.
so much fun. But thank you so much for bringing Auric back to us here at Bridge, coming back for a little kind of trip down memory lane. And thank you so much for chatting to me today. It has been absolutely fantastic.
Pleasure.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly.
If you like this series, remember to follow us and leave us a review on the podcast platform that you use. It really helps us out. Enjoy.